Hi, boys and girls. It's Mrs. Carmi here today to read a little bit more of Thanksgiving on Thursday, the Magic Tree House Story chapter book that we've been reading by Mary Pope Osborne. Chapter 5 is called Eels and Clams. Jack looked at Annie. "We can't stay here," he said. "What?" she said. "We can't go home now. The Pilgrims need us to help them." "But we don't know how to do anything," Jack said, "and Squanto is going to figure out that he doesn't really know us. And don't worry so much," said Annie. "We help Mom and Dad make our Thanksgiving dinner every year, don't we? We can help the Pilgrims, but we'd better hurry." Clutching the big basket, she started running towards the bay. Jack sighed and then ran after her. At the rocky shore, they stopped and looked around. Little waves rolled onto the short stretch of sand. The salty air felt clean and fresh. Seagulls swooped over the water. "I wonder where the eels are," said Annie, "and the clams." "I'll look in the book," said Jack. He pulled out their book and looked up eels in the index. He turned to the right page and read aloud. Squanto showed the Pilgrims a way to catch eels. He showed them how to push the eels out of the wet sand with their bare feet and then grab them with their hands. "That sounds fun," said Annie. She put down her basket and pulled off her shoes and stockings. She held up her long skirt with one hand. Then she walked over to the rocks to the edge of the water. Jack put the research book in his bag. He pulled off his shoes and stockings and joined Annie. They dug their bare feet into the wet sand. "I don't feel anything," said Jack. "Let's wade into the water," said Annie. Together they stepped forward. "Brrr," said Annie. "No kidding," said Jack with a shiver. He kept squishing the muddy sand with his toes. He felt pebbles and shells. Then he felt something soft. "Hey, I think I found one," he said. Annie splashed over to him. "Where?" "Stand back," he said. "Here." Jack squished harder with his feet. The soft thing moved. Jack squished more. An eel slithered through the water. Jack grabbed it with both hands. "Ah!" he yelled. I don't know if I would be able to do that. The eel was long and skinny like a snake. It felt slimy and icky. It twisted and squirmed. Annie laughed as Jack tried to hold on to it. The eel wiggled out of Jack's hands and fell against Annie. "Yikes!" she yelled, jumping away and bumping into Jack. With more screams, they both tumbled into the cold water. They scrambled up and splashed to the shore. Annie was still laughing. "Poor eel," she said, trying to catch her breath. "We scared him half to death." "Him," said Jack. "Forget eels," said Annie, her teeth chattering. "What about the clams?" Jack was wet and cold, but he took out the book and looked up clams. He turned to the right page and read aloud. Squanto taught the Pilgrims how to dig for quahog clams. Quahog clams are hard shell clams. They can live for 60 years or more. The oldest have been known to live for almost 100 years. Oh, forget it," Annie spoke in. "What?" said Jack. "We can't catch them," she said. "They live to be so old. We can't just end their lives." Jack sighed. He sat down on a rock. Annie sat next to him. Their clothes were soaking wet. Their feet were caked with muddy sand, and their basket was empty. "What other things do Pilgrim kids do to help?" said Annie. Jack opened up the book again. He looked up Pilgrim children. He read aloud. Pilgrim children work very hard. They built fences and cared for animals. They planted, harvested, and ground corn. They picked pumpkins, peas, and beans. They guarded the fields. They fished and hunted. They carried water. They collected nuts. They cooked and cleaned. They did everything they were told. They never complained about being tired. "Oh man, I'm tired just reading this," said Jack, closing the book. "We make lousy Pilgrim children." "Yeah, I know," said Annie. "Maybe we could do something like keep an eye on the turkey and tell them when it's ready. That's how I help Mom every year." "Annie, Thanksgiving in Frog Creek is a whole different story from Thanksgiving with the Pilgrims," said Jack. "Annie, Jack," a voice called. Jack quickly put away their book. Then they turned around. Priscilla was standing on a rock. She held a pumpkin and carried a basket filled with yellow squash and red corn. "I was looking for you," she said. Chapter 6 is called Good Work. "Good day, Priscilla," said Annie. "Good day," said Priscilla. She walked to them. "Did thou fill the basket with eels and clams?" "Not really," said Jack. "The eel didn't want to get caught," said Annie. "And the clams lived to be so old, we didn't think it was right to take their lives." Priscilla laughed. Her eyes sparkled. "What strange children," she said. "But you both look wet and cold. Would you like to come to my house and warm up by the fire?" "Yes," said Jack and Annie. They washed off their feet and pulled on their shoes and stockings. Jack picked up his bag. Annie picked up the empty basket. Would thou like to put some of my corn and squash in thy basket? Said Priscilla. Oh, thanks, said Annie. She took some squash and corn from Priscilla's basket. And perhaps would thou like to carry the pumpkin? Said Priscilla to Jack. Sure, said Jack. Sure, said Priscilla. I mean, indeed, said Jack. He felt relieved. Now they wouldn't have to go back empty-handed. Isn't that what the cover looks like? Jack wrapped his arm around the heavy pumpkin. Annie carried the basket. They followed Priscilla back to the village. The pilgrims and the Wampanoag were gathering in the wide dirt street. Women were baking bread in an outdoor oven. Some boys were setting wooden planks on barrels to make tables. Mary, the little girl, was carrying a bucket of water. Squanto sat smoking a pipe with Chief Massasoit, Governor Bradfoot, and Captain Standish. Jack hoped Mary wouldn't ask him about the clams and the eels. He hoped Squanto wouldn't ask him about Captain John Smith. He hoped the governor and the captain wouldn't ask him about home. Jack hid his face behind the fat pumpkin. Priscilla opened up the door to a small house. Then she led Jack and Annie into a dark, smoky room. The only light came from the one window and the fire. Sit by the hearth, said Priscilla, so that your clothes can dry. Priscilla laughed again, shaking her head. There where the fire lies, she said. Oh, sorry. What's the hearth? Annie said, looking around. Priscilla laughed again, shaking her head. There, where the fire lies, she said. Jack put down the pumpkin and his bag. Annie put down her basket. The hearth was so large, Jack could have stood in it. He and Annie got as close as they could to the warmth, crackling fire. Several pots hung over the fire. Near the pots, a turkey was roasting on an iron rod. The Thanksgiving turkey, whispered Annie. Cool, said Jack. The very first Thanksgiving turkey, he thought. Would thou please stir the corn pudding whilst thou art drying? Asked Priscilla. She pointed to one of the pots. Indeed, said Jack. Priscilla took a wooden spoon out of a jug of water near the hearth. She gave it to Jack, and he put it in a thick, bubbling pudding and stirred. And here he is stirring. I must gather nuts, said Priscilla. Whilst I am gone, move the roots close to the ashes and stir the herbs into the seafood chowder. Indeed, said Annie. After Priscilla left, Annie looked at Jack. What are roots and herbs? She asked. Look in the book, said Jack. Annie took the research book from Jack's bag. She looked up roots and read aloud. The pilgrim called certain vegetables roots. These vegetables, such as carrots and turnips, grow under the ground. Oh, said Jack. He picked up some carrots and turnips near the hearth and moved them closer to the hot ashes. Next, Annie looked up herbs. She read aloud. The pilgrims called leafy green vegetables that grow above the ground herbs. They made salads with herbs. They used dried herbs to flavor soups and seafood chowders. Jack saw some dried plants hanging from the rafters. Those must be the herbs, he said. Annie broke off a leaf and sniffed it. That smells good, she says. She leaned close to one of the pots. And that must be the seafood chowder. It smells like the ocean. She crumbled the leaf into the chowder. She took another spoon from the jug of water. She and Jack both stirred the pots. Good work, Priscilla said when she stepped back into the room. Jack smiled. The fire made him hot and sweaty. The smoke burned his eyes, but he didn't mind. Finally, he felt useful. Priscilla put some walnuts close to the fire. Squanto told us which nuts are good to eat, she said. Squanto taught thee a lot, said Annie. He saved our lives, Priscilla said quietly. Last winter we were so cold and hungry. Half of our people died. Annie gasped. How? She said. Sickness, said Priscilla. Fever took my mother, my father, and my brother. Her eyes were bright with tears. No one spoke. The sound of the crackling fire filled the room. Then Annie put her arms around Priscilla. We're so sorry, said Annie. Yes, we are, said Jack. Thank you, Priscilla said with a sad smile. 'Twas a terrible winter, but we never gave up hope. And now, God be praised, we have had a good harvest and we have peace with our neighbors. In the glow of the firelight, Priscilla was beautiful, Jack thought. Not only was she kind, but she was incredibly brave as well. Come, she said. She wiped her eyes and stood up. Something special is about to take place. Would thou like to watch? Sure, indeed, said Annie. She and Jack jumped up and followed Priscilla outside. All right, next time we're going to read chapter 7, which is called Arm Exercises. All right, I hope you are enjoying the book and learning a lot.